later in this episode.
There's this stigma with the homeless population of those people. And I'm like, they're not any different than everybody else. And a lot of people are like, oh, they're scary. I'm like, my kids hang out with them. They're not scary.
Welcome to This Is My Story, a podcast brought to you by Victory Church in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. My name is Austin. I'm here today with Jenn Hollinger from the Columbia Dream Center. We are so excited to have you with us today. Jenn, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a pleasure. Today we're going to talk about Jenn's story and being a stay-at-home mom and what her life looked like as she knew God had something else for her life, like knew more. Because being a stay-at-home mom is not an easy task. It's not an easy job. But that search for something more and purpose in her life, and how God, like he does, he'll just bring it into our paths in such beautiful ways. So we're going to dive into that story today. Again, Jenn, thank you for being here today. So tell us a little bit. What was it like being a stay-at-home mom? What's that life like?
Chaos and mayhem.
Chaos and mayhem. I like that.
Yes. I have 3 daughters, and we do a hybrid homeschool private school program.
Okay.
So at the point that it was 2020 is when everything changed. So I was homeschooling 2 daughters, and then my youngest was, how old was she? She was 4.
4? Okay.
Yeah. So we were doing school, and of course it was COVID year, so we were doing a whole lot more school.
Yeah. Yep. A lot different. You're changing, everything's shifting and changing all the time.
Yes. So, and my husband was working from home, so it was a whole lot of family all the time.
Wow.
So we were all together all the time, which isn't bad.
Yeah. Well, it's just a lot. It's a lot.
But it is a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot to see each other all the time.
It's a lot. And I had been searching since the beginning of 2020. I read The Purpose-Driven Life, and I was like, okay, I know that there's something more for me to do. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And we were planning on sending my youngest Esther to preschool in the fall, and I was like, okay, what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
Where am I at?
Yeah.
Where am I going from here? So, and then basically Columbia Dream Center fell in my lap.
Wow. Okay. So tell us a little bit about that. So you're a stay-at-home mom. How does this opportunity, how did you get involved with Columbia Dream Center? How did you hear about it? And then tell us a little bit about what they do as well as we dive into this.
Sure. So my older sister was actually on the Columbia Dream Center advisory board.
Okay.
And she had been on it for a few years. And she was also writing grants for them and doing fundraising and things. And I had helped once, like the spring before COVID started, I had helped do a food truck giveaway because she's like, come, we need help. And I said, okay. So I went and I helped her out with that. And then she called me up one day and she said, hey, we need a clothing bank coordinator. She's like, it's 10 hours a week. It's $10 an hour. It's grocery money. Yeah. I said, okay. Yeah. I was like, Esther's going to preschool. I need something. So sure, why not?
Yeah.
So, and I have a retail background. So I was like, clothes, I can do that. I can organize clothes. Easy peasy, done.
Yep.
And the clothing bank is honestly it's the beginning of how Columbia Dream Center started.
Okay.
The original ministry they had was a clothing bank.
Okay.
That started from the Council of Churches. It was like a satellite from the Council of Churches in the basement of Columbia Presbyterian Church.
Wow. So they saw a need. They saw a need and they said, hey, let's just start something and see where this goes.
Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome.
So from the clothing bank, they expanded into a homeless shelter. We also have a very large food ministry, soup kitchen, power packs, summer food service program, as well as a food pantry. So it got really big. Yeah. And it continues to expand.
Yeah. Wow.
And we do everything out of Columbia Presbyterian Church.
Okay.
So it's all I think the church was built in 1880.
Wow.
It's a really old church, and we use every single little square inch of the church in order to run all the ministries.
That's awesome. Wow, that's incredible. So how many people does Columbia Dream Center, is it open daily? Like, what does that look like?
Columbia Dream Center shelter is open daily. So the shelter guests come in at 5 o'clock at night, they get dinner, they sleep, and they have to leave at 8 o'clock in the morning. And then our Restart Day Center is open from 9 to 3, Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
So anybody in the shelter who doesn't have a job, they can hang out in the Restart Day Center all day. So like this week, they're not out in the cold.
Yeah.
And things like that.
Yep.
So, and they also in the Restart Day Center, there's job search help with housing, how to write your resume,
Wow.
how to get your birth certificate.
That's
Um,
incredible.
yeah, all kinds of stuff.
Oh,
So,
wow. That's amazing. So you start there, kind of just helping out, doing things. At that point, were you like, this is something from God for me? Like, did you feel that purpose yet at that point? Or were you like, I'm kind of just doing something. It feels good because I'm helping. It also feels good because I'm making a little extra money. Like at that point, did you feel like this is where I'm supposed to be? Or when did you start having that connection?
I think in the beginning it was just, hey, this is fun.
Yeah.
And we actually, my husband and I made the decision after the first night I was there to involve the rest of the family.
That's awesome.
So when we would open the clothing bank in the evenings, it would be myself, my husband, and our 3 girls would all come with us.
Yeah.
And I think with all of us working together is where the changes started.
Yeah.
My kids started to learn that there are people who live a completely different type of life than they do.
Yeah.
They didn't quite understand that not everybody had a house
Yep.
and that not everybody has food and that kind of thing. So getting them involved, I think, stirred even more in myself of the helping and the serving. And it changed a lot of my life. It brought me out of my shell of my stay-at-home mom shell that I had gotten myself into.
Yeah. Yep, and you can get into so many times we do this where we get into those shells where you're
Mhm.
like, especially during 2020, like you're living your life and you don't really realize it, but you're just in a rhythm and a routine. And sometimes those rhythms and routines can become, and it's not always a bad rut, but it's a rut. And you're just
Yeah.
like, I'm just not, there's something more, but I'm missing it. I don't know exactly what it is. So that's incredible that you were able to get involved. So you started with sorting clothing and coats, you said. And then what was the next move for you there?
So I started out in the clothing bank. There were a couple volunteers there. So we reorganized some stuff because my retail background is very, you need to be able to shop.
Are you very, because I have a retail background as well. And I did merchandising for a long time and I supervised it and I coached it. And I'm very OCD about things. And like,
Mhm.
that's how my house is. That's how everything I do. Are you the same way? Or is it
Yes.
just more of when it's work, you're really in it?
I can mainly with shopping and things like it has to be organized.
Yeah.
It cannot be chaos
Yeah.
because it drives me nuts.
Do you ever find yourself, I do this, and maybe some of our listeners find themselves doing this as well. You are shopping, you are at a store, and you start cleaning up the aisles, and you're like
Yes.
putting things. I've done that where I've been at a store, and I'm like in the phone case aisle, and there's phone cases on the ground because that's what it was like at the store I worked all the time. And all these phone cases are everywhere, and I'm like, what? No. And I just start cleaning them up and organizing them and putting them back out. And I'm reading the bottoms, I'm reading the UPC codes, I'm like fixing them by the SKU. Because that's just once you're in retail, I don't know, it never leaves you. Like
No, it doesn't.
It's in especially when you're in merchandising and organizing. And my wife did the same thing. She did it for another company, and she's the same way where she's very like, okay, we need to have this ad ready, we need to have this looking nice. So that's awesome. You're able to use that passion kind of and continue that.
Yeah.
In a ministry role, really,
Yeah.
in a support role for people who are less fortunate. So tell me a little bit about what it was like then with your relationship with your family and with God. Like, when did you, I know it was once the girls got involved, but when were you like, this is something I want to dedicate my life more to and continue being involved in? And like, when did you go full time working there? When did that happen?
The first year, I mainly did clothing bank. I did help out. The first fall I was there, I helped because it was still, COVID was still pretty hot and everything.
Yeah.
So we were packing food boxes to hand out. So I was helping out with that for a little while. But then I went back to just the clothing bank. And the more I got into it, the more I looked at other things. I'm like, okay, how can we get grant money to get shoes and to get different things?
Yeah.
So we had nice stuff to offer people. Because the people who were coming to the clothing bank deserve clothes just as nice as what I get at the
Yeah.
store. So, and I was working with my sister with the grant writing and things like that. And then summer 2021 happened and the outreach coordinator quit, at the end of the summer of 2021. And, I was sitting there and I was just like, I can do that job. I was like, I can do that. And I looked at Pastor Dave. He's the director. He's the pastor of Columbia Presbyterian Church and the director
Okay.
of Columbia Dream Center. And I looked at him, I said, Pastor Dave, I said, I can do that job, and I can do my clothing bank job, and I can do it all in 30 hours a week. And he said, are you sure? I said, oh yeah, I can do that. So then I just kind of jumped in with both feet.
Yeah.
Because it was jump in, figure it all out, and, and put stuff back together that had fallen apart and things like that. And for me, like, that's what I do. I like to do that.
Yeah.
Like, I like to make all the things work and make it work great. How can I make it better? And we do that all the time. We're like, okay, this is working, but can we make it better?
Yep.
How can we do this? And we do it through conversation and collaboration with all our ministries there.
That's awesome. So working in ministry, you get to see a beautiful front row view of life change in people and people who are broken and just that restoration through Christ. Do you mind, without going too much into detail of any names or anything, but do you mind sharing a story? Do you have one of somebody that, like, through your serving and through being your obedience, like, you were able to see something come to fruition in somebody's life?
No, we actually, our shelter director, and I'm pretty sure she won't mind if I share, when I first started, she was working part-time in the basement of the church, putting all the food boxes together. That was her job. She didn't like people. She was like, you can stay over here and I'll be over here and we're good. She went from doing that, and today she is our shelter director.
Wow.
Her next step in her journey was running the Restart Day Center. She is amazing with people. She is amazing with hurting people because she has the background to back it up.
Yeah.
So her life is completely different.
Wow.
Than when I first met her.
Yeah.
And like, she's great. She helps so many people each and every day in the Restart Day Center and in the shelter just put their lives back together. I mean, if you need to find a house, I'm like, go talk to Lizzie. I said, she'll find you a house. You need a job, awesome. She'll find you a job.
Yep.
Like, she's just good at finding all the things.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So sometimes, to our listeners, somebody who maybe hasn't really interacted with homeless people, like, sometimes it's like you said, even your daughters, like, didn't even recognize it's happening in their own neighborhoods. To somebody who has never done that, like, how would you encourage somebody if they're like, I kind of want to do it, but it seems scary? What would you say to somebody who's kind of in that boat of like, yeah, I want to take a leap of faith and I want to step into this, but I just don't know, I'm scared?
Yeah. Start small.
Start small.
Yeah. A lot of our volunteers just do one thing. And they come and they do one thing and then they get more involved. And then they do a little bit more.
Like Lizzie.
Yes, like Lizzie. And we have amazing volunteers, and they all just started let me see what it's like.
Yeah.
There's this stigma with the homeless population of those people. And I'm like, they're not any different than everybody else.
Yeah, it's just somebody who's down on their luck, or something happened and now they're in this situation. Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, oh, they're scary. I'm like, my kids hang out with them. They're not scary.
Yeah. Actually, I actually sent, before I had even met Jen, I sent her an email one day and I was like, hey, my wife and I are doing something. We want to invite Ruth to this. Can she come? It's Tuesday nights. And I got a reply back and she was like, no, our family, we're not available Tuesday nights. And I was like, okay. And she was like, my family goes down to a homeless shelter and volunteers. And I was just like, well, that's a good reason. Yeah, that's a great reason actually to not be coming to do what we're doing. So, like, that's so incredible. What was it like as a parent? Like, obviously you're saying your kids are comfortable and you're comfortable with that. To somebody whose kids may be interested or wants to get their kids involved, what would you say to somebody for comfort? Where would you say, I know you said start small. What would that look like for a family who wants to start serving together?
For families who want to come serve with us, we start them basically in the clothing bank or in our food pantry line.
Yeah.
Because the parents and the children can volunteer together. Like my kids, they're on the food pantry line, they're down in the clothing bank, and we always have them with an adult. Like, we don't leave any of the kids hanging out around the building by themselves and that kind of thing. Because the building is open to the public.
Yeah.
But, we always partner them up, and serving in the clothing bank, it's as like you're putting out clothes, you're helping people pick out clothes, and that kind of thing. So, I mean, there's interaction there, but it's not like one-on-one interaction and you're like, oh my goodness, what do I do next?
Yeah.
And we always, like, I have a lead volunteer that's down in the clothing bank all the time who has handled every single situation under the sun down there. So, we always have the more experienced volunteers or the staff members there as well.
Yeah.
So, there's always somebody, if you need help, have a question, that kind of thing.
No, that's awesome. I love that. I love that. So tell me, what has your life been like? So you find something you're passionate about. There's so many people who, I don't want to speak for everybody that's listening, but it's very common. People who were in your shoes 4 years ago of, I feel like there's something more, but I don't know. What would you say to somebody like that who's searching for that? And then I want to hear, like, what have the fruits of your life been like? Like, what have you seen since then, since finding that purpose and getting that connection? What it's been like for you?
Basically, in order to find your purpose is just pray about it
Yeah.
and try different things, because you don't know which one is going to be the thing for you.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, mine just kind of fell in my lap.
Yeah. And it does. And it does. God works that way sometimes.
And sometimes that's what happens. It's just like, there it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, volunteer for different things.
Yeah.
Because I've done many different things over the years, and my prior volunteer stuff has hugely helped me in what I do now.
Wow.
God has used the things from my past to give me inspiration, guidance through what I do.
Yep. I've seen that same thing in my life where, again, I worked retail for 10 years, and there's so many different jobs and opportunities I was stepping into, and just what I didn't see then working in a secular environment. And I want to encourage people who work in a secular environment, like, use that as a mission field. Like, God's going to place people in your path. And like, I didn't realize then that I was ministering to people and I was pastoring people that were hurting, and I didn't realize that's what I wasn't talking to them about God specifically, but I was there comforting them and helping them step through something that they were walking through in a hard time. Because sometimes when you work in a secular environment, there's that boundary where they're like, you can't talk about God, you can't talk about religion. And so it's like, I'm as close to talking about God as I possibly can without breaking the rule, but like telling them, speaking scripture into them and stuff without saying it's scripture. And like speaking into people's lives. And I didn't realize at that point that God was training me up for something else. And it's so neat when he does that. And you do these things that you're just like, oh, I kind of just did something, like whatever. But like, that's part of your story, and God's equipping you and he's training you for something else. So I want to encourage people, don't give up. Like, if you're like, I feel like I'm in a dead end job, I'm doing something, like, keep looking at it as your mission field. God's training you. He's equipping you for something greater. So stick with it and continue to pursue him. Like Jen said, pray. Like, that's the biggest spot you can start, is just start praying. Lord, reveal something to me. Maybe something's going to fall into your lap like it did for Jen, and somebody's going to invite you into something and you're like, wow, this is it. But continue to pursue him, and he'll reveal that to you over time. So that's awesome. So what now that you're been there a couple of years, like, what has that been like, knowing this is where God has me and I'm in where I believe God has me for this season of life? So what has that been like with your family, with your mindset, like overall, just what has that been like?
Honestly, it depends on the day. There are days, ministry is a rough business.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be rough, and it can be, beyond joyful. So, each and every day and each and every season has its own trials and tribulations and triumphs. And, like, we've gone through a lot too at Columbia Dream Center, just with people who don't understand who the homeless are and what they do, and those people and that kind of thing. The fall, we went through a stressful time with the borough and them, those homeless people, they do this, they do that, and we are trying to open the eyes of the people around us.
Yeah. So
and then there's triumphs. We have a business owner come up and say, here, I'm going to give you guys $1,000 a month. And we're like, wow. Oh, thank you, Jesus. We're like, that is amazing.
Yeah.
So, and just seeing what Columbia Dream Center was when I started and what it is now is amazing. And just the people that we've been able to help, and the lives that have changed, and not just the people who come in, and not just the homeless people or the needy or the poor. It's also the volunteers, how their lives have changed, how different staff members' lives have changed, and things like that. And it brings great joy. Like, I mean, even on the days that I come home and I look at my husband, I'm like, no one else is allowed to need me. Even on those days, I'm like, at the same time, I'm like, I love my job. I love what I do. Even in the most stressful times, I still love it.
Yep. And I love that's yesterday I had a really hard thing I had to go do. It's ministry life. And I came home and my wife was like, "How are you doing today? Like, how was it?" And I was like, "It was great. Like, it was hard, but I love what I do." And I
Mhm.
felt so fulfilled doing it. And like, that's just an incredible thing. So I want to encourage people, continue, like we said, pressing into God. Like, if you're not at that spot where like you're feeling like I am here for a purpose and I'm living in that purpose, like continue to pursue him, that he reveals that to you and puts those passions into your heart for you to see. So, Jenn, thank you for being here today. Before we go, I want to ask, sometimes people hear a story like this and they want to take a call to action, a step to something. If somebody's in the Lancaster County area, is there a way that they can get involved with somewhere like Columbia Dream Center specifically? Is there a way that they can give if that's something they feel the Lord stirring in their heart today? Where can they find information like that?
Sure. Our website is columbiahas.org. And we're also on Facebook. Our page is Columbia Dream Center
Okay.
on Facebook then, too.
Awesome. Oh, awesome. Thank you so much, Jenn, for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, such a pleasure today. And listeners, thank you for listening. We'll have another podcast next Monday, so make sure you tune in. We hope you have an amazing week, and I hope you hear our voices again sometime soon. So have a great week and be blessed. Thank you for joining us on this episode of This Is My Story. Hearing these incredible accounts of God's work in our lives reminds us of the enduring power of faith. If you've been moved by these stories, don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform and on YouTube. And don't forget to share the inspiration with others who might need it. This Is My Story is recorded at Victory Church in the heart of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. You can learn more about This Is My Story and Victory Church in the show notes. Thank you for listening and be blessed.